My name is John Sullivan. I'm one of our relationship managers at LIMRA, and I get to work with a variety of our members across the association to help leverage our research programs and other membership services. Two of these LIMRA members include Surify and AAA Life, two unique organizations who prior to the pandemic were very well positioned with strong digital strategies that have allowed them to be there for and help so many consumers during this time of increased demand for life insurance. I'm very excited for the conversation ahead, featuring Dustin Yoder, founder and CEO of Surify, and Betty Schick, Senior Vice President and Chief Experience Officer with AAA Life, where we'll learn a little about their journeys to this point. And I'm especially interested to hear where they think the hockey puck is going to be. What are some of the future trends they see on the horizon? I'm also very excited to welcome my dear friend, Jim Kerley, back to the LIMRA platform, as Jim will moderate the conversation and contribute with his valued experience as a strategic partner. I encourage you in the audience to also participate in today's discussion. And thanks to those of you who submitted questions when you initially registered. So please use the Q&A button that you should see on your screens. And our speakers will try and respond to as many questions as possible in the time we have together. So let's now get started and introduce the speakers for today's LIMRA membership webinar. Betty, it's really great to see you again. Let's please start with you.
Well, hi, and thank you. It's great to be here, everybody. As John mentioned, I'm Betty Schick, and I am currently with AAA Life as the responsibilities for experience, Chief Experience Officer. And I've been with the AAA family 17 years, of which 7 are with the Life Company. Prior, I have experience in marketing and in financial services, spent quite a bit of time at Discover Card, and always had responsibility for market research and customer insight. So excited to share what I have learned and look forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
So I'm Dustin Yoder, the CEO of Surify. Pleasure to be here with you all. I am in charge of leading kind of where Surify is going and enabling life and annuity companies to kind of meet the customer expectations, agent expectations, and ultimately I'll call it the world's expectations of where a life insurer will be digitally to sell digitally, service digitally, and engage with their customers. So we're about coming on, we'll be about 200 people in the next couple months here, and just feel honored to be here, but also maybe more importantly, to go on the journey in life insurance for the last coming on 5 years, helping change life insurers to kind of enter this next realm of full digital.
As John mentioned, and it's such a gracious introduction, I had the unique privilege of working at LIMRA for 14 years, serving in senior executive positions, the last 5 years of which I was the chief membership officer for LIMRA and LOMA. In 2020, I started a consulting firm, a boutique specialty firm that is focused on partnering in transformation with our member companies. And what a great year to start a firm specializing in transformation. Thank you to the pandemic for that. And we specialize in 4 specific areas: strategy, operations, and distribution, the fourth of which is engagement. And I'm pleased as part of the engagement strategy to represent Surify in and across my client base. So good, it's good to be with you. Dustin?
All righty, well, it looks like I'm ready to kick off this party on the initial discussion here on customer centricity. So let me do that. I am now shifting, let's see, 1 second here. Can I get confirmation that this screen is coming through?
Starting to share your content. We don't see the slide yet, but the share content has started. There we go, we're all set.
I apologize, never a dull moment, as we all know. I thought it would be good as we go to kick this off to look at where we've all come from. This surely is not going to be the full extent of the life insurance space in the history of going door to door and collecting payments on a weekly basis. But I thought as we look to enter a much more interesting discussion, just a couple minutes here on customer centricity and specifically customer centricity like evolution over the last X amount of years here in life insurance. So for starters, I mean, we're using this word customer centricity. I know there's a lot of words these days that are used about like what does this really mean, and I figured we'd land that plane by just stating our definition for today, right? It's about being customer centric is a strategy. It's a focus. It's a mission based on and/or focused on putting your customer first and at the core of your business in order to provide a positive experience and long-term relationship. I think we can all say that inside of all the organizations that I get the privilege of working with, that is said, but I think the question is, are we doing it and how are we doing it? So I thought it would be fun and interesting to watch, well, what have we done over, the years here to evolve some things. So for one, agents have driven life and annuity. They still are, just so we're all on the same page here. I think what we're seeing right now as one major step is this more omni-channel approach from only human agents to the ability and I call it the opportunity to evolve so that our prospects and our customers can choose the channel in which they acquire, learn, et cetera, engage with our companies. And so I thought that one's, that has been an evolution. I think it's really one just on the beginning. It's in the beginning. And we're still, just from a numbers perspective, right? We're still, surely sub 10% of not of being digital, et cetera. The second, and I've actually had the privilege of sitting down through one of these. I like to say, there was a time when this was all, everything presented about life insurance and the way it was sold was done, sitting at the table, mixed with, I call it the pamphlet, or I had a really big binder presented to me one day and walked through with me with an agent. I think what we're seeing now, and at many of these companies, is financial, reports and tooling coming digitally, and so that ability to get visual reviews of everything, but also just looking, how does that customer and prospect want to review and consume their information, because I surely couldn't take home the big binder that I was given, and ultimately I think there's a big part of being able to consume that information wherever you are. So just I think these are all steps. I will tell you on each one of these, some companies haven't made that shift, but I think the customer of today is really pushing us to make sure, kind of everything is digital or digital, visual, and consumable wherever and however I want. The second is paper forms to digital, going as far to reflexive digital pre-fill. I think going back to about 2015, it's kind of crazy to think, but there was even belief in many ways that going from a paper form to just a digital one would revolutionize the space. Now, I think that is, I'll go as far to say, I think there's a lot of ignorance in that. However, it just shows how bad and how challenging paper forms and all the potential questions and ways to answer them can be confusing. And now today with digital pre-fill, meaning on the extreme, right, the ability to pre-fill that information with the customer's information, but maybe more importantly and more common, the ability to give people the right question at the right time and really limit, I'll call it, or really strive for in-good order on the business side, but also for that customer, give them a good shot in a seamless experience to achieve that. The next is, I would say it's always kind of, a lot of these are close to my heart in that, it's from mail to digital status and notifications. Still to this day, most parties are just sending a piece of mail, for example, when you're in underwriting. I'll give a couple examples, but like, when you go to buy a policy and you're now not approved, right? So you didn't get accelerated, which is something we'll talk about next. But you just get a piece of mail, or once a year, we're communicating on that 3 to 5 day piece of mail. Mail is an amazing tool. However, the real-time nature of it has changed. Has changed where we're able to use that and reinforce mail, because we all still get it, and it can be very powerful. But also look at ways for digital statusing and push notifications, text messaging, et cetera. So we're seeing life insurers start to adopt and say, how do our customers want to be communicated with? And many of our clients, one of the biggest things here is how the perception that, number one, people would use, let's say, mail as their core consumption method, but two, that they'd even use web as their core consumption method, has really changed to say, like, the average person, and I think, Betty can talk about this too, like, we see the average person preferring actually mobile as the average consumption and communication tool, where they live and breathe on mobile, and that's where they would ideally like to be communicated with, or at least as an option. The other is medical exams. I think everyone on this call has probably got knows this well, but I will tell you, I still always have to get the medical exam because my because I don't answer all the questions seamlessly, the MIB has information on me that I've answered those questions not seamlessly, so I always get pushed there. But really looking at like the customer, although it's not that big of a deal to me, I think the data shows that whether it's both in marketing but also Indeed, when a medical exam is required and a paramed, et cetera, that this does get in the way of the process, and that's not the customer's ideal case. I'm not going to stand in front of the underwriting train on why this is, because I know there's a lot of good reasons. But I think the move towards digital record polls, all digital, kind of back end as best we can to get the very healthy individuals through immediately is a big step in customer called it customer centricity, or asking the customer what they want. That's not going to solve every problem, because risk is very important here, but I see us more and more moving this direction. This one does crack me up a bit. It is wild how even when COVID hit, some of the most progressive and loved companies still struggled due to their internal compliance, or call it the things that they expected, to move from a wet to a digital signature. Meaning we're involved with companies that just they really focus on that agent relationship, so much so that the agent had to be there and watch the document be signed. And that was like kind of the end point. But when COVID hit, for example, that was, a wrench in that chain. So just watching, for myself, right? Like when I'm looking to get something done, and the last thing is that signature, I'll be frank, I don't always want to be there with someone, or I want to get the job done, right? My spouse, has told me to go get this done. And she's, she doesn't want to wait another week, right? And so I'm using the example here of like, I want to do it on my phone or on my computer, at midnight, because I still hadn't got it done. The other that we see, this one's kind of emerging in many ways, but going from, as I mentioned, we were agents in many cases were, going door to door, but now moving to a world where, we're getting away from just ACH and those checks, those voided checks, which I remember very clearly. My first policy was like that. Now to a world where the question is, what is the, can we facilitate, given the cost of credit cards and other things, but can we move to a customer-centric approach where how you want to pay, when you want to pay is always available? And the other thing here is, call centers and downloadable forums. I will tell you, that's a big part of our life, is kind of evaluating that and looking at, does the customer want to make an actual physical phone call, and or would they rather, change a beneficiary, update a payment, change their address, etc., make a withdrawal without calling in or downloading the form and faxing it and all the above. I could tell you I would like to. I'm only speaking for myself, but we just see a big push towards companies making that move now. I guess I leave off as we pass to the discussion here. What is, I think the question really is not, what have we all accomplished in the last several years here and where we are, but what does customer centricity look like in 2025? I was afraid, I'll tell you, I was afraid to put 2030 because I'm like, only God knows what that looks like. But 2025 is interesting. Like, where are we going? Why are we going there? I think is the question we now, transition to. So thank you all for your time. Hopefully this kickoff got the brain churning, and allows us all to move into some great discussion here.
The variety of things that are going on in companies. And I always like to, because I've had a lot of experience in the insurance industry, I want to anchor our view of how well we're doing a little bit. You have to remember that for years and years and years and years, the insurance industry was run based on a distribution relationship strategy. In other words, the key customer for companies were their advisors and their agents. And they served that population exceptionally well. They designed systems and processes to advantage the agent in their relationship. And today, because of all kinds of things, including wonderful opportunities in the omni-channel space and other space, changes in customer expectations, we have a whole industry that essentially is racing towards a new operating model of the future. And that's really what your question was in the title of the presentation today: how life insurance and life insurers, as opposed to agents, can build a better business around user experience. That's the core of it. The other piece I'd point out is the industry continues to deliver on its promises, paying annuities and life insurance benefits in the millions and millions and millions of dollars every day. So our core promise is strong and healthy. So with that, I'd really like to kick off the first question, and maybe Betty, it goes to you as an insurer. Where do you see? Let's go right to the point where Dustin left off. Where do you see customers being, and where you see your organization being in 2025 as it relates to customer centricity?
Well, thanks, Jim. I think I'm a little biased on this question of customers being a part of the AAA family. At AAA Life, it's our mission to serve our members, and so customers have always been at our core. Do agree on the agent distribution side, they offer great insight to us, but my suggestion and view is to really talk to our customers. It is at the foundation. So if you're close to both agents and the consumer, learning from what are they struggling with, what are their blockers, what do they need help with, and how can we support them better? So it really is about addressing needs, tackling those blockers, and if you can be relevant and solve those problems, we really see that retention and fewer lapses. We see recommendations and referrals growing, ultimate satisfaction. It could be through Net Promoter Score, through our surveys, but when people are comforted and they're satisfied, in the end, not only again are they going to stay with you, but they're going to refer, and then they'll look to you when their needs change.
Some really interesting points, and I think the model that you have in AAA is that your life insurance business is essentially wrapped around a whole variety of other services that your members can take advantage of. And so I think that unique positioning we want to talk about a little bit as we go forward and think about customer centricity of the future. But if you think of a more traditional life insurance company, they didn't have the benefits, the additional service benefits, if you will, the value added, right? And so they're racing to make those changes. So Dustin, I guess I would ask you as a follow-up to this, are you seeing with your clients, they're moving towards trying to provide additional kind of value-added services or communications to help build a relationship between the insurers, the carriers, and their policyholders?
Yeah, I mean, this is I think there's a huge push going on to say, like that the biggest question, like what is a life insurer besides like a death benefit kind of payout company, that security, that financial benefit? And that core question is how do we be something more, because we feel like Amazon's being something more, or a lot of other, I'm using that as one extreme, or these financial institutions are really creeping in on us by offering more. And how do we make sure to solidify our place as a firm, like a partner to that family and that individual for the future? And so practically speaking, the first question is like, how do we make sure we're not just a payment that we make, that someone makes every year, every month, depending on, their payment structure, so that we can look at what are added benefits. I think you're seeing examples of this in the market. I'll use, there's one of this is Mass Mutual's Haven Life, right? As one, I'm trying to use kind of an out there for me, like we currently don't work with them. And so I'm using them as someone that's offering a lot of different like third-party benefits. That would be an extreme of like, here's a software provider that'll help you manage your will and beneficiary. Here's a health provider that will do X, Y, and Z. So you're seeing that, and that's one side, all the way over to, Surefire works with a lot of partners that are looking at how do we offer health, wellness, and reward benefits, to say we're not just going to be about, that payment or that life insurance, but we want to be a partner in your happier, healthier life. And so I think that's a big angle. Those are more, I'll say those are more progressive examples. I would say a very, very small percentage of the market is actually out there offering like third-party benefits. As you mentioned, AAA obviously is offering holistically as AAA as a company. That's, they have their own, they built a massive org around that premise too. But these are, as you said, traditional life insurers going that. The one other point I'll put out there is many of these companies, when you go to an extreme of offering like these third-party additional benefits, like from health and wellness to financial literacy to financial education to their customers to rewards, that's still extreme. The question is, most of them are like, hey, it's 2021, but I don't even have the basics to offer that next level of relationship. How am I able to, going back to the nuts and bolts of customer centricity, what are the basics that someone expects from a financial and an insurance institution today that makes me feel just that they're not somewhere mailing me pieces of mails once a year? Like, that's a lot of times the gap they're trying to solve, versus some of the more mature organizations, or ones that have really put this forward for years, they're taking that next step. And I think there's going to be some catch up here of nailing down the nuts and bolts of digital or the basics of what a customer wants, to more extremes that are maybe a little more flashy to some here, but they're becoming a norm of like, how do we differentiate and how do we offer more value I say from a business side, at a consistent price that we can afford to differentiate.
Well, we're getting some really good questions coming in the Q&As, and I'd like to respect those as well. Betty, here's a question I think AAA is posed to answer well, and that is, from an enterprise standpoint, how do you bring your entire organization along to have a mind shift, if you will, from customers, our agents are the customer, to our consumers are the customers, and our agents are partners? How have you done that at AAA over the years?
So, I think our agents, and we all have great agents and we know great agents, they have always been customer centric, right? And the best ones, they listen to their customers, they ask the right questions. And so I don't think the shift has been that hard to be customer centric. And, when you talk about the whole organization, certainly we're a multi-channel organization, and it really is about helping agents realize and appreciate that the channels all work together, right? And we're all supporting each other. And we have lots of proof of that in our business. So again, I don't know that it's such a huge shift. The great ones ask the questions, they're close to their customers, they understand what the needs are. I would also add, it's a little bit about not just who you are, but it's how you feel, right? How do you feel about your family? What are your expectations for your family? And you put two 45-year-olds with two children side by side, how they feel may not be the same, even though they're in the same life stage. So I think helping understand that and make sure that we're addressing those needs for folks are pretty key.
One of the questions that just came through is about barriers, breaking the barriers so that consumers really want to take the next step. So we can, consider significant increased penetration. And I should just parenthetically add to this that I know one of the major initiatives that Dave Levinson, as CEO of LL Global, is pushing through the LIMRA Loma organization and many other organizations is how do we penetrate the unserved and the underserved marketplace? And that's the essence of this question. Dustin, as you think about the work that you are doing with your customers, how do you see the carriers making it a significant marketplace? Are they using new methods, new tools, new communication strategies to reach other customers or potential customers that should be saying yes to the offer of life insurance?
So yeah, I think that's a great concern. I think there's a general belief that we're hitting the it's the 80-20 rule, right? We're finding a lot of our revenue in kind of the top 20% in our subsequent areas, and we see age. And I'll say this is, remember, 95%. We say 95% of life insurance is sold through agents. So I think what's technically happening is not necessarily a new tool, but it's asking, where are these people and how do they where are they? Like maybe is the first question, because if our hundreds of thousands of agents across the US aren't finding them or aren't focusing on them for one reason or another, how do we find them, right? We're an institution that cares about making sure we spread this around and be known to help all different, small and large, premium amounts, right? So what's happening, I think, on the most practical level is we're looking at, from a technological level specifically, is we're looking at third-party distribution areas. So something digitally that where are these parties and how do we embed these type of offerings and products in those areas? Because if we all believe, and the facts show that agents are the ones driving product sale across the US and across the world, actually, but we haven't all met the kind of goal that we want as companies, as an organization, and as a life insurance industry. We have to now say, where are these individuals and families, et cetera, and how do we make sure we're in front of them? Because we can't just we can't double our agent count in those areas tomorrow because it's hard, and rather, like, is there any ways to accelerate? And so third party, I use the example actually pretty often. A lot of the startups, the startup life insurers are really looking at, like, there's a bank called Chime. I don't know if you've heard of this new digital bank, Chime. There's Acorns, et cetera. There's these type of players. We see life insurers, like, literally right now you can go on Acorns and you can find Ladder Life, Bestow, and Haven Life all embedded in that. And that's a fast growing banking and investment platform that has a lot, they're targeting the full range, not the the same Charles Schwab style kind of clientele, and they're kind of coming from, I'll call it coming from the bottom of younger people that are trying to grow their money or giving them practical ways to save. So that's one area. Like, I just use that as a use case. Like, we can't just say this strategy, how do we scale bodies? Because we all know that's harder and harder actually in many ways. So how do we scale eyeballs? How do we scale getting in front of them and creating tools inside of those applications or places to educate and create very easy to turn on and protect and for protection mechanisms. So that's one major area that I would say, like, that's a theme I see arising is, like, you could go as far to say, my last point is, what about when someone checks out, this is a kind of forward-looking use case, when someone checks out with a stroller on Amazon, right, says something about them, et cetera. I think there's going to be a phase where we just start looking at where these people are and how we find them from a life event status, and then deriving kind of a product opportunity there. So I think that's where we're going, and I don't think we're that far today, if I'm honest.
So I have a couple of questions. One that relates to agents, and Betty, you made a point earlier that agents have always been customer-centric, and I think that's absolutely 100% correct. Good advisors love their customers. They know their customers. I'm curious around the question of how do we move advisors not from being customer-centric, but to being able to use all of the omni-channel tools and environment available today, and understand how an agent's role can shift to support all of the work that omnichannel does and all the benefits that omnichannel has for the total consumer experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great question. I think I'm going to say there's a myth buster here. And the myth buster is omni or direct. We haven't used that word today, direct, is in competition with the agent. And so that's the myth. And we, as an omni-channel company, can tell you through data and results, they do work together and they support each other. So I think the first piece is to make sure that our agents understand how direct supports them. We know, and LIMRA research tells us, very succinctly, that the first place consumers today are going to shop is on the web, right? But they're not going to end there. So they need agent support, they need advice. Now, how they get that advice, so it's connectivity. How do we get the web connected to the agents? It could be click to chat. How do we get leads to agents? And where customers want support and assistance, it's how you interact and integrate those channels together. But let's watch that myth. They support each other. They really are not in conflict.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, and I think some of the experiences from carriers who have taken bold moves in the direct consumer space, built great platforms to serve customers, are actually moving all of those tools and processes into the hands of the agent. So essentially, we're arming our agents with a direct-to-consumer model that will advantage both them and the insurer and most insurance carriers, and more importantly, the customers. So you brought up data analytics, and we have a question from our audience today about how data analytics can be leveraged to shape strategy around user experience. And that's a great question. Obviously, somebody out there is a lot smarter than I am, because I didn't come up with that question. So thank you to the participant. But how would you address the idea of strategy and user experience?
So, it's live right now. And Dustin, you mentioned it in your opening presentation. Certainly, first of all, it's making the experience of buying life insurance easier today, right? Data is so powerful. There are instances we can skip the medical exam. So that's clearly one. From a targeting perspective, we have access. We all know that life insurance is purchased in life stages, but do we always get it right? And so now the data is there that you can get it right. And so, being relevant with those messages is really, really important to your strategy. And I think, years ago, it might have been a little bit more of a broad messaging, but now it's more personal. So I think data allows you to be personal in your communications with your messaging, but then also on the offer side. The data is robust. So if you're going to talk with me, offer me that product because you know something about me that is relevant. And, we're seeing great results with that ability.
I think the advantage that we have through knowledge and through understanding what the analytics actually tell us with customers is going to drive great performance in the future. I have the great advantage in my practice today, working with about 25 insurance carrier companies all through Europe, and they're all struggling with the same thing. How do we get data? How do we get the data so we can understand the customer? It also leads to a question around something that you related to earlier, which is the benefits of additional services. And how do we know when we should be offering the next best offer, whether it be a product, whether it be a service? And I think companies like yours, fraternal organizations, other multi-line carriers that offer a variety of products have a distinct advantage of being able to talk to customers more broadly about the next best idea or offer. How do you approach that in the context of customer centricity and user experience?
Well, we chuckle a little bit internally. The chief experience officer and the chief actuary are highly connected. And it in our organization, data and analytics is a function overseen by our actuarial team. And honestly, it's about robust modeling, right? And we're learning a lot, right? So you are using that data to build your models. A lot of testing has to occur, right? So you try something, you go back and you analyze what happened. These are very basic principles, but it's moving quickly, and in large quantities, we're learning a lot. So we're relying on those models, we're looking at behaviors, and then altering, and then trying new things. And I think it's only going to continue, and it's moving very rapidly. The data sources and, so the data and analytics folks are hard to recruit. I think we're all probably facing that. And I think that's only going to continue as we move forward.
You brought up a really interesting point that the head of data analytics actually and the actuarial are kind of combined, they're together. And I in my mind, I'm thinking, well, actuaries have for the last 100 years been doing unbelievable work looking backwards, looking at the experience, the mortality and the morbidity and all of that. So they great job of, what the underwriters said this risk was like, and then 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, what that pool of risk actually looks like. And now you've got someone who is professionally trained in that methodology to be responsible for data analytics, which is all about forward looking. But it represents, I think, a very good example of where the industry is right now and how it has to pivot to take advantage of the history of actuarial science and the promise of data analytics and AI. Very, very intriguing combination. Which leads me, Dustin, to a question around data, and certainly your organization and organizations like yours thrive and promise customer benefits of the data that you can collect through the experiences that they enjoy using your services. Can you speak a little bit about what some of the benefits of the data you're able to gather, the benefits that insurers are taking advantage of now as they think about customer centricity?
Yeah, I mean, the first the first kind of like highlight that I'll say, or like my first statement here is that what's so interesting is when you walk into I'm going to just say the average life insurer, the biggest problem is there's no pipes or receiving ends to collect a lot of this data digitally. So one of the maybe not shockers that I'm mentioning to everyone here is that we talk about data and analytics, but in many organizations, if you say, can you tell me, what, the amount of people this year that tried to do X, very rarely is that data readily available, which I would say, sitting around a coffee table with anybody on this call, we'd all say, well, that should be, or that would be nice. And so to start off, like one of the biggest shockers over my last 5 years has been like, we talk about almost like projective things, but a lot of the piping, I call it electrical and plumbing, that needs to be laid to collect it isn't there. For example, we'll use some very basic ones, like what percentage of people try to change their beneficiary or something to that effect, or log in. Well, that, sometimes people can answer that question and sometimes they can't. What's the persona that of the person trying to do that? Is there any, I'm lumping in what a data and analytics person can help bring, but ultimately like having those bits of data. For example, we talk about lapse rates or persistency. So there's lapsing and then there's persisting, right? And we're all looking to say, how do we curb that or extend persistency? That's a goal of ours as an industry. Well, what indicators can we share, like what things people try to do, whether it's through a call center or digitally or whatever, look at that data to say when someone does X, Y, and Z, there's an indication that they may be desiring they could be up for lapse, they're a risk type of person. The problem that we've encountered a lot is there's a lack of that data, okay? So that plain and simple, even when you talk about drop off, if someone has a direct to consumer approach or an agent and we talk about in good order or people not flowing through, you can get the what percentage of people pass through an application and who doesn't. That's like the highest level data. But when you start asking questions like where in the process do they fall off and why is that, I would just say we're all generally surprised at how challenging it is to get that. Now flip that on its head and say, well, what we're really looking to do is, I think as a baseline, we're looking to establish plumbing and electrical so we can start answering those questions, because it's really hard to talk about 2025 or 2030 and what we want to do if we can't base it on data points we're collecting on, as an example, who's coming in via web or mobile. Betty and I have talked about this before many times, but when you send, like the average life insurance company, I would just say, I'm going to throw out a general statement. They believe that more people would use web than mobile, and so they'll focus on web. It's just natural. Hey, we can focus on web. I can't tell you, how all those data points were built, but long story short, they know they're behind, so we do web first. However, when you start sending out your emails and different things, more people come via mobile than web. And it's only through data and collecting that, so we can just see it on our screen, that more people are hitting it through a mobile device than web. Like something as basic as that are like the things you start uncovering. Then you can, like with our platform, my first technical mentor always taught me, you can register every ping of the server. So anything you could perceive in your head that you would want to know, it is there. Whether or not you've drawn it up to the surface to consume it, that's another point, right? And so I think a big part of what we're looking to do is say every ping of the server that's relevant, from like where they go on a digital application, where they are in a process, how long they spend somewhere, you start going down that path. As organization needs to be able to answer that if we're going to think that we need to wake up with new models, new ideas in 2025 or 2030. And so that's the nuts and bolts of the things that we collect. But then you go into, I think the real future that I see is like, it's all about projection, as you're saying. Data and analytics, I would actually say in many ways only gives you what you have. I think the future that we need to get to in life insurance that we're all attempting to do is we need to be able to say where it's all going based on that data, but you have to have enough of it to do it. And so that's a big problem when a life insurer goes live with something, they sometimes don't have enough information to satisfy team members because it's a new thing to make really fast changes. So it's almost like the ones that have been collecting data for longer actually have much more ability. They almost have a multiplier effect on like knowing, as Betty said, who we should present this offer to, you know, what product someone wants. If you're not collecting all that nitty gritty, you end up in this world of like, hey, we all know that a 59-year-old should be offered an annuity or something. And like, you know, oh, it's just the way it is. Well, who's looking at them beforehand and how are we bringing someone to that point are all data points and I would say capabilities that the industry's, I'll call it, we have a major opportunity to find.
Hey, Dustin, I might want to add a little on here, Jim,
Please.
just the word real time too, right? So Dustin, you're talking about the foundation, which I totally support, you know, getting the data and the information, but then, you know, real time, right? And you mentioned Amazon earlier, they've set the stage for us. And so, you know, how do you use that information at the time? Right? So you're on, you know, somebody could be filling out an app and it's time to enter the social security number and we see there's a delay, right? So pushing out that message to say, can we help you? You know, do you know why we're asking for this social security number, et cetera? So I just thought the point of real time is also right in our current environment. And I think expectations are there. And back to the agents, can you get real-time information to them when they're with their clients? I think is really an opportunity we all have.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I missed the last opportunity to talk about the agents. I just wanted to double down or double click, Jim, on your comment as well with the whole agent approach, that it's so crazy that like we see companies moving to direct to consumer approaches or omni-channel. And then as you mentioned, they're actually just offering the agents those tools. And it's like ironic, but it's almost like, well, if we build something, the statement's been made, well, I like so much what you build for the customer, like, why aren't we offering that to our agent? Like, what do we have something magic that the agent has right now? Or actually, do we just have something old and clunky typically? And we actually just need to, like, they want the same experience or same capability with some kind of, you know, agent spin or agent update backend. But it's just funny to watch how that is a lot of the approaches. Like, it's not like treat them separately, but they're all human beings is actually what we need to look at here.
Yeah. Enabling them to be efficient in today's business environment is critical. Which leads me, as we think about the hour, the pandemic, a little bit of a wrinkle for the entire world, and companies are starting to come back. I like to think about it as the opportunity to return and rebuild. In other words, just don't come back and find the files that you left on your desk, 13 months ago. They're still there and you start using them again. So, but returning to whatever return is in the workforce, but also rebuild. And so I guess I would ask, maybe let's start with Betty and say, from your standpoint, what is it that you've learned, or AAA has learned about the things that they have to rebuild to calibrate the business of 2025, if you will, to calibrate that business based on what we've learned from the pandemic?
Yeah. So I think for AAA Life, I would say the things and the trends we saw before the pandemic have now been escalated. So maybe not rebuild, but go faster would be. And an example, Dustin referred to mobile devices, and we know, again, through our LIMRA research, and we're seeing it in our traffic, people are coming to us via mobile devices. Over 60% of our traffic is coming from mobile devices. These are baby boomers and not necessarily that younger generation that you would think about. And so it is about that customer experience. It's about ensuring that it is a great user experience for folks, and that back to those other companies, we've got to meet their expectations. But digital's not going away. It's and again, it's where we see almost the first place people go, right? They're not going to walk into the branch necessarily anymore. They're not going to pick up the phone. They're going to go to the web. So, how do we advance that experience for folks and then ensure it's connected to those agents and to that call center? So what the customer experience is online is consistent then when the other channels engage with them.
So what you're saying is that we should change the name of this thing to something other than iPhone, because there's no phone in iPhone, if you will, at least based on what you're saying. And I think that's so true. It's really funny. As we think about, we maybe have, 5 or 6 minutes left. What are the critical issues, Dustin, that we haven't talked about that you think we ought to just spend a couple of minutes on from your perspective? And then, Betty, I'll come back and ask you the same thing.
Well, I mean, I'm always interested, I think, as a greater topic to talk about, like, what is the customer, not only like where are we behind and what are we stepping into right now? Like we're moving fast right now, but in order to get things right, you have to architect things well to wake up in 2023 or 2025 with that, whatever that is. And I think my little lob out here is like, the question that I have is, what does customer centricity look like in 2025? And like, do we have any indications of that? Maybe it's a big question, but I think it's an important one if we're still catching up. I think we're about 10 years behind property and casualty right now, just to be clear on, like, as an industry. I actually commonly say that. I believe it. So we're 10 years behind, but also the world's moving faster than ever. Like, where do we need to get by 2025 is just a big question that I think is interesting to discuss.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I'd say that there certainly the multi-line companies, property and casualty companies, have had to go a little fast, have had to go significantly faster to stay in line with the digital platforms that have emerged. But I think there's a lot of learning that traditional insurance companies are taking from that. And to just put a great plug-in to the LIMRA research, they're telling us about all of that all of the time. I think one of the greatest things that LIMRA did last year was the pulse surveys that really took the pulse, if you will, of customers or carriers, both domestically in North America and across the globe. So, stay tuned for that and keep an eye on the research that they're putting out there for us, because I think we will be advantaged because of it. And we have examples after examples of research that turned into significant business strategy shifts on behalf of individual companies, maybe even AAA Life, for example. Mm-hmm. But Betty, what would you say we haven't talked about?
Yeah, it's interesting. I like to think about really one of the core concerns or challenges we have in the industry, and that is number one, we aren't a product that people have sought, right? I mean, we know this. People don't want to talk about mortality. We mentioned the pandemic earlier. It certainly has brought urgency to our category, but our category has been somewhat of a black box. And we know, again, through LIMRA, people don't understand our products. They don't understand how much it costs. They don't like our jargon. So I'd say we have to go back and remember education. And let's make sure we're teaching. You mentioned the middle market earlier. We have to educate. And by doing that, people will be more comforted in what they're buying, and then I believe will, in the end, keep the products they have and then be willing to engage again at the next life event. So let's not forget, I'll call it the blocking and tackling, and education and helping our industry. And this is all of us working together to do that, and I think we'll all be better off for that.
You're so right that it's just continually educating and remembering that the next generation needs to understand the promise that the core product offers. But your point is interesting, and it makes me think about net promoter scores. You mentioned that earlier, and my professional experience in working with customers is that point of sale NPS scores are typically very strong. Why wouldn't they be? Customers bought something, they should be generally happy, right? But it's the measurement post sale, if you will. When we look at the customer's view of advisory in the long term, the scores drop dramatically. And I think that's a lesson that we might include in your education piece, is both in terms of insurers continually educating their customers, but also remembering that the advisory deals with the agents reaching out. So with that, Dustin, I think we're about on time here to close. We're at about a minute to go, and I just want to turn it back to you for any closing comments that you might have.
No, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their morning. First of all, to Betty, Jim, John, but also all of you on the call today. We had a great turnout, and hopefully, as we all are living and breathing and dreaming about, yes, I will admit that I wake up thinking about some of these things, about these major changes in the space. I just thank you for participating in here, and the questions were really good. So I know we have some great questions here. We'll figure out if we'll send out some answers to those. But thank you all, and we look forward to talking to each one of you about this. Surify is always available, so we'd love to dive in. All right, well, thank you all. Have a wonderful day and almost end of the week, and we shall all meet again very soon.
And special thanks to LIMRA. Yes,
thank you, LIMRA, for everything. I threw in John there, but LIMRA as a whole, this is great for just everything, and we're a big LIMRA supporter ourselves, so that's why we're all here. So thank you all. We'll do it again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.